Hi, I'm Phil Ashey from the American Anglican Council with your weekly Anglican perspective. We're in a series now on questions for the Anglican Communion, and the question we're on is false teaching in the church. And why do we have this false teaching? And of course, the answer is that whenever the church succumbs to false teaching, it's always because it has abandoned the biblical worldview. And we looked at that in terms of the four questions that Dallas Willard has placed. What is reality? Who is well off? What does it mean to be a truly good person? And how does one become a truly good person? Well, what does the secular mindset say about that? Well, the secular mindset says that reality, let's just look at that first. Reality is only what you can see, touch, taste, and feel with your bodily senses or comprehend with your mind. So gratify the flesh and its desires. The secular worldview says reality is made up of individuals who have absolute unfettered freedom to define reality any way they want. That's what Justice Kennedy said in the famous opinion. Some call it the sweet mystery of life passage in Casey versus Planned Parenthood, but a perfect example of what people believe reality is all about. And of course, that leads to a kind of terminal narcissism, a loss of both common good and community. People say reality. Some who would describe themselves as progressive will say, well, it's a never-ending power struggle between those who've been victimized and oppressed and the victimizers and the oppressors, which must always result in an overthrow of the oppressor, the enthronement of the oppressed, and the beginning of a new cycle of power struggle. And of course, all of them would agree that reality ends effectively for people when we die, and your only hope beyond death is some memory or legacy that will live on in the lives of people who will also die. Now, Paul says something very interesting about this kind of a non-biblical worldview. He says in chapter 4 at verses 18 and 19, he says, they are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. What Paul's saying there very simply is this kind of thinking, secular thinking, that it's only material, that it's all about gratifying yourself and your desires, that it's a never-ending power struggle, and that you go in the grave and you die, and that's it. Well, that comes, he says, from hearts that are hardened to God, that lead to a loss of sensitivity of what is good and right, to indulgence of our sinful human nature, and a lust for all kinds of evil, and ultimately ignorance and darkened minds. And that sums up the culture that we are facing, the Western culture that is being exported to other places all over the world. Now, next week what I'm going to do is share about, well, how do we know when this kind of secular worldview has actually come into the church and has changed its thinking and its preaching and its teaching. So we'll take a look at that next week.